Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks so much for tuning in. I am excited to have this talk. We are going to be talking about entrepreneur burnout, talking about the good, the bad, and ugly of getting into entrepreneurship. We're going to try to focus on the good, but certainly we want to have a raw conversation about some of the struggles and how to overcome those. I am here with two amazing guests. We've got Justin Schenck. Justin Schenck is founder of Growth Now. Um, Between podcasting, events, everything else that he's into, he has a fascinating business model, and we're definitely going to explore his story and how he built that up. And I've got Ronica Cleary, a good friend of mine in my industry, public relations, founder of Cleary Strategies. She began her career as a White House reporter and from there transitioned into the PR realm and does an amazing job with the work that she does. So she also has dealt with a lot of the ups and downs that entrepreneurs do, and certainly excited. I'll kick things off. For the viewers in here, I imagine that we have several entrepreneurs, executives, business leaders who know all about burnout and are looking for ways to better overcome that. We probably have some aspiring entrepreneurs watching too who want to know what they could potentially be getting themselves into. And for that crowd, let me tell you, starting a business, quitting your day job and starting a business is like jumping off a cliff. Is the best thing I do. I mean, you're falling until you're flying. And hopefully you take flight sooner than later, but everybody's journey is a little bit different. And before I get to the other two panelists, I want to talk just a little bit about my story. I mean, I you know started my business at 27. Before that, I worked at a big New York PR firm. Got to the point where I had a vision and I saw an opportunity, and this idea just kept growing and growing until I turned it into a business plan and essentially had the opportunity to you know leave that company and start my own business. Um, People asked me, how did you know how to start a business? I told them I didn't know. I learned on the fly, um, and grew very quickly in the beginning, um, and got a little overconfident. I think, if I'm being honest about my journey, which led me to situations that I created, but situations where I definitely got and had to find ways to overcome that. And we'll revisit that. But before we do, I want to go to Justin because Justin, it was a post that you had posted, I believe, discussing the sometimes the loneliness that entrepreneurs can feel, especially when you are a founder driven small company. You can absolutely end up in a position where you're feeling that. And I know I felt it, throughout, I'm coming up on a decade now.
Yeah.
Working independently. I've definitely felt that many times. Justin, talk about your story and your experiences running into that burnout scenario.
Yeah. So unlike having the choice to go full-time entrepreneur, my last job that I had chose for me, and they fired me. Now I was building a business on the side. I already had the podcast, and that was moving and growing an audience, and which was really, really great. I just didn't quite understand business. Like you said, I didn't know anything about actually starting up like a real business that generates decent income. But when I was pushed off the ledge, I was like, I have to figure this out, and I have to figure this out really quick. I was literally in a place where I was like, okay, am I putting money into my business or am I paying my rent this month? Like, what's the choice that I'm trying to make here? And I found myself constantly at my computer 24/7, trying to figure out how to get clients, how to build a Rolodex of people, fill the pipeline, as they say in the business world. And I was just literally just worn out 24/7. And the truth is, if I were smart enough, I would have surrounded myself with people who could have helped me. But I think as an entrepreneur, you want to paint a pretty picture for people when it's not pretty. And so I believe the burnout comes from the internal struggles that we have more than the work that we do or the time we put in, right? It's that internal tug of war of like, when do I pretend that everything's great? Because who wants to work with a struggling entrepreneur versus when do I open up and say, hey, I need help with this? And so for me, it actually happened about 6 months into my full-time journey. I realized that I was like literally to my last couple $100. I was supposed to fly down to Florida to speak at an event. But it was literally like, do I go speak at this event or do I pay the rent the next week? And I decided to, put everything out there. And I flew down to Florida, spoke at this event, and ended up meeting people who were willing to have the right conversations to guide me through the path that I needed and get the answers that I needed. And when I went home, I made $22,000 in 3 weeks and completely changed my life and haven't looked back since. But the realization was the burnout was coming from the internal struggle of trying to paint a pretty picture when it wasn't pretty. But then community was able to clear that up for me, where I could make it a pretty picture. But when things get tough, I still have people to lean on. I mean, all the way through to, you talk about COVID, 70% of my income when COVID happened was speaking and my live events. So I lost 70% of my income for 2 years overnight. And it was my community that helped pick me up and figure out, okay, where do I create new streams of income? And it just has become easier. And setting up my business now in a way that I only work 3 to 4 hours a day really, really helps long-term as far as like burnout and being passionate about what I do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we'll get back to some of those points too, especially, the emotion that you put into the business. I think people lose sight of that. They look at business people as staunch numbers people. No, when you founded it from the ground up, I mean, that's your baby, and you take pride in it, and you do invest not only financially but emotionally and all other ways into that brand that you're growing. And Ronica, I am so glad that you're on here because you and I know a lot about each other's entrepreneurial journeys, being colleagues in the same profession, and having had, raw conversations in the past about all the good, bad, and the ugly. I've learned a lot from you. I hope you took some good nuggets from me. And I would love if you could talk about, your experience launching this business, going from a reporting career, launching the business, and some of the burnout that you might have felt through that process.
Well, thanks for that, Brian. And I'm really glad that you're finally hosting one of these where we don't have to talk about sports so that I can contribute in a meaningful way. But I love what you said. I wrote it down, the falling until you're flying. I've never heard that before. I always say that am I the only parent on this group?
I'm a step parent to 2 kids.
A step parent. So you have an appreciation, but I always say entrepreneurship and motherhood are not for the faint of heart. And I definitely learned that. I don't know if the hard way is the right way to put it, but it's been a surprise because I do love Justin's point about like the presentation that entrepreneurs make, because you say, well, who wants to hire an entrepreneur or a business where they're falling apart? So they really make these great impressions. So you, from the outside, you might see it and say, wow, entrepreneurship looks pretty amazing. And then when you're inside of it, you think, wow, this is not what I expected or necessarily signed up for. I do think it's incredible though. And I'm so glad that I did it, but the process has been quite a journey. I know that one of the things we're talking about today is burnout. And for me, I have a really interesting sort of perspective on it. I think that in a weird way, because I have kids, I avoided burnout is the wrong word, but because I have to pick up my kids at the end of the school day, because I have to take them to school, because I need to get them to certain lessons or practices or doctor's appointments, I think that I made the leap to hire sooner than I would have if I didn't have that responsibility, because it's really easy to just say, like, I can do it myself, right? And work myself ragged and work 15-hour days or whatever it might be, because I'll just keep the money for myself and I'll do it all. But then when you say I have these responsibilities, there's not enough time. And in doing that, I mean, maybe I'm still working a 15-hour day, but at least half of that day is with my kids. I think that I made hiring decisions sooner than I would have had I not had them. And I think that that has helped me avoid some of the burnout. And it's also sort of forced me to get over that idea that a lot of people have when they start out as solopreneurs, like, I'm the best at this job, or I'm the only person that can do this job. Frankly, that's probably not true. And as soon as you realize that there are people out there who can do what you can do, maybe do it even better, it kind of changes your relationship with it. And I think it can really help with burnout, because you have other people to lean on to help you deliver results to the people that are looking to your agency or your company or your business or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Well, and on that level, I wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of having that team. And Ronica, you started your team early. I did too.
You did really early, Brian.
I was recruiting out of college.
Yeah, I mean, you're amazing.
You brought on more seasoned people, so we've had different hurdles with that. And I'm very proud of some of the young professionals I've developed. Some of them are doing amazing things. Others I don't like to talk about, but that's part of bringing on a team and building it and learning from it. Working with people, whether it's clients, team members, in our profession, the media, whatever. I mean, you're constantly learning about people and people's nuances and trying to get better at judging, reading, being intuitive, in all of those interactions. But with team building, you two have really invested yourselves in, established communities. Ronica, I know you've invested yourself within established communities. Justin, you've built communities, yourself, with what you do, which is amazing. Me, I have done a terrible job doing that. Now, what I did do a good job of, and what I continue to do a good job of, is building an internal support team. While I tended to, bring on younger staff, I would have an established team, my attorney, accountant, my, head of finance. I would bring on, I built myself my own team who wasn't necessarily working internally with Flackable, but who were more seasoned professionals that I could level with. My attorney would be the first one to tell you. I mean, half the time she was my attorney, half the time she was my therapist. But you do need that support team, especially when you are a founder-led company. Is my opinion. I'd love, Ronica, I want to go back to you. Talk to me a little bit about how you've embraced community and how that's helped.
For sure. I mean, I would 100% not be where I am today, just personally, and as a business owner with Cleary Strategies, had it not been for community. Now, I am really curious about Justin's experience of sort of creating that. I don't know that I'm sure in a way I've created community, but I've really tapped into established communities, mostly virtual, because I started my business in 2018. And then obviously we all went through the experience of sort of navigating COVID. I tapped into these really great virtual women's networking communities that have been a source, like Hey Mama, Entreprenista. I recently joined a group called Luminary. They have been amazing sources of clients, finding talented people to hire, and friendships. And I take it a step further, and I use those virtual communities to reach out to the people in those communities whenever I'm in new cities for work. And I email those people and I just say, I'm in this community with you. Let's have coffee. Let's have a drink. Let's do something. Let's go to dinner. I am very proactive in not just like joining the community that exists, but then taking it to the next level, because it's only going to help you as much as you sort of leverage it. And like, even you, honestly, Brian, I can't even recall how we first connected, but like, I still remember we went to lunch or something, and I just asked you, I'm like, what do you charge people money for? And it wasn't out of like an insult. It was just, how are you doing this? And what are people seeking you out for? Because I sort of started this business without having a clear definition of what service I would provide. And so I'm just unapologetic and unafraid of reaching out to people, getting them on the calendar, asking them for time, and also just not always having an agenda. Like, sometimes if they become friends, sometimes it's a client, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's nothing, and not sort of getting caught up in that, but just knowing that the key to sort of any sort of personal and professional success is networking, community, people, the confidence to sort of put yourself out there. It's been incredible.
And Justin, talk to me a little bit about. I mean, again, you have built. I've seen you literally as you've grown. You know, your business and all the different areas of your business. You have built communities. You've connected me with so many amazing people over the years. Just from me, jumping into your community. Talk to me about that process.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, look, I've got a great vehicle, right? I have a podcast that does really well. So I get to sit down and interview some of the world's most amazing people, people like Ed Milet and Gabby Bernstein and Bert Kreischer, and the list goes on and on. So that has given me an opportunity to get into really great rooms, number one, right? So I'm a big believer in who you surround yourself with is the key to success, happiness, stress-free life, all those things. And when I speak on stages, I talk about the 5 people you need in your life. And I'll just run down really quick because I know I'm watching the time here. But it's your cheerleader, the person who makes you feel like you can run through a brick wall, right? That person who hypes you up. The bruiser, somebody who's going to push back a little bit, somebody who questions like what direction you're going in. The next person is your softie, right? That shoulder to cry on, that person who can help pick you back up when you're at your lowest. Your mentor. I look at mentor a little bit differently. For me, a mentor is somebody who has something innate inside of them that you want more of in yourself. And then the 5th person is a coach, because I believe that you should always be invested in your future, a financial investment in your growth, whether that's in your health, relationships, spirituality, your business, whatever. I've had coaches in all of them. As a matter of fact, I'm about to hire a writing coach. So like I'm constantly investing in myself, and having those 5 people throughout my growth has been a game changer for me. I've invested to be part of masterminds and different types of communities, and I pay to or buy tickets to go to events just to meet people that are like-minded. But for me, building the community itself, I've built a number of different communities over the years. Right now, I have a smaller 16 entrepreneur mastermind, 6 and 7 figure entrepreneurs called Skeleton Key Mastermind, based around the idea that, when you're either one connection or one opportunity away from that next big success. And so that's what we do in this community. We help each other. And I really build these networks off of my network. And I say, hey, look, like I'm building this thing. Who wants to come along? And I'm fortunate enough that I've built an audience where people are interested in that. But the idea is, hey, I want to make that one connection for you. I want to introduce you to that one person who could change your life, or that one person you've always wanted to meet. So I get to bring some of the rock stars that are on the wall behind me into the mastermind to teach. But for me, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't first invest in myself, if I didn't first join multiple masterminds, figure out what works, what doesn't work. Same with live events. I do my own live events. By the way, they're coming back. I'm making the announcement, I guess, here on your LinkedIn, hopefully September this year in Westchester. But, bringing back the live events, because there's nothing like being in the room filled with people who are on the same journey as you, looking to grow. And I think there's just so much power in that for people. And I like to be able to be a person who can facilitate that for people.
Yep. Amazing. So I'm gonna attempt a gnarly pivot. All right. We're talking about community building. I want to talk about a man who bought a community. Elon Musk purchased Twitter 2022. He has been in a lot of headlines. So Tesla's stock has been down. It's down about 30% year to date, which is a massive drop off. At its peak in 2021, Tesla was selling over $400 a share. It's now down to 174. And obviously the Twitter transaction went on in between all of that. He's been very vocal on Twitter, in my opinion, saying some smart things that should be said, saying some very stupid things that probably don't need to be said. But we're at a point now where Elon is under the microscope and getting heat from especially Tesla shareholders because he is still the CEO of Tesla. There are even major shareholders that I know who have been sounding out saying Tesla needs a real CEO. Elon needs to get it together or put somebody in here that's put together. So this is an entrepreneur. Again, Elon, I'm always gonna kind of side with the entrepreneur in free speech. But at what point do we need to limit it? And Ronica, you are my fellow PR expert, so I want to kick it over to you first. Tesla, Elon, what's your take?
Well, that is a very broad question, Brian. Look, at the end of the day, of course, like, we have free speech and you can say whatever you want, but there are consequences to it and people will make decisions. And you even, talking about the price of a Tesla share going down. I mean, to me, that I'm not following the stocks or the trends, but I'm sure that's completely corresponding to the acquisition of Twitter and how that was executed. And the way in which that transaction went down had to affect people's sort of confidence in the Tesla stock. But Elon, I have to believe, I have to believe that this is purposeful at this point because it's gone on for long enough that he would make a decision to stop speaking out so much if he didn't like the repercussions. And I don't want to say that there is a clear, specific strategy to this, but I think there must be a part of him that likes being a flashpoint and likes this sort of attention. And he's willing to take the risks, and perhaps he sees the long-term potential for the businesses that he runs to still grow and succeed in spite of dips in value or lack of trust from shareholders, whatever these outcomes may be. Or I just can't imagine. He is a smart person, right? I cannot imagine that he would continue to do this if he didn't in some way see that the long-term potential was on the upward trajectory. I mean, it's possible that he doesn't, and I don't necessarily think he's taking the advice from others. It's really hard to give people of that level of power sort of strategic advice and guidance unless they really want it and they're willing to surround themselves, like with the 5 people that Justin mentioned, which I think is so smart, and I love that. I don't know who's the person that's his bruiser, right? To act, does he have a bruiser, to use your language? I don't know, but I can't imagine he's like waking up going like, oh, what a surprise, this happened again. There has to be something deliberate in this nature, in this behavior that he feels this is productive.
Well, and one thing with Musk and Tesla, so I mean, they operate without a fully formed PR and advertising department.
Could you imagine being on that team? I mean, it would be a disaster. I mean, I don't know. He's just his own strategist. I don't know.
I'll say this. So I just read his biography and really learned more about the man himself. So I'm an anti-news person, right? I believe it's a propaganda play all the time because I've read 2 headlines. I saw a headline with Elon Musk in his interview where Elon Musk destroyed Lemon. Same interview, different headline, said Lemon destroyed Elon Musk, right? So I just kind of look at the facts. Like, what are the facts here? So yes, the facts are he does not listen to anybody. Number 2, whatever he decides, that's what happens. Number 3, I don't know if it's necessarily a play for the stock with him doing these dramatic things all the time. But the reality is he has some massive childhood abuse that leads him to love the massive ups and the massive downs. You see it in his personal relationships with women. You see it, obviously in his businesses. He thrives off of the hate. When things are going really, really well, he's a really big fan of burning the boats. Now, with that being said, he is super smart. So buy Tesla stock, because it's going to go back up at some point, right? Like, by the way, I'm supposed to do a disclaimer. This is not financial advice. I know nothing, right? But the reality is,
otherwise you can hire us to clean up the mess.
So with that being said, I think the Elon Musk thing, I get pulled in different directions with him. Some days I like him, some days I don't. Do I believe they should be implanting chips in people's brains? Absolutely not. A guy who wants ultimate control and you're allowing him to put a chip in your brain, probably not the right move. But at the same time, he is going to go down in history as one of the biggest world changers in our lifetime, for sure, in a long time. And so we'll see what happens. I do believe in free speech, but I do believe in consequences to saying things that are radical. On either side of the spectrum. But that's part of it, right? You want to take the risk, roll the dice, hire these guys that I'm on the call with. Do not hire me.
So, speaking of free speech, another awkward pivot.
Love that.
I know. I'll get better at them. TikTok ban. So this was a big story. So last week, U.S. Congress overwhelmingly in the House of Representatives, 350 something to 60 something, voted not for a TikTok ban. I mean, what TikTok ban's the easy way to label it, but what they voted for was essentially a bill that would force the Chinese ownership of TikTok to sell the company, for them to continue operating, here in the U.S. And me, again, I'm a big free speech guy. I was first generation Facebook. Literally, my freshman year in college was when Facebook opened up to every university. So, I mean, in my adulthood, grew up with social media at least. Now, TikTok's a different beast because now you've got very young people getting on board, and I don't know what that's doing to them. But well, we'll talk a little bit about what that's doing to them. But anyways, this is now passed by the House, sent to the Senate. We'll see what debates happen in the Senate. We'll see if they try to change it. This is going to play out over the next few months, and we'll see what ultimately happens with it. Now, I'll start off with my take. I do believe, the CCP having access to all of that data is potentially a very massive national security threat. So I am glad that we do have people in the U.S. government who are at least looking at this and taking steps to see what they can do. And I'm not just saying it's dangerous for them to have our data. Axios last month reported that for the past 5 years, Chinese hackers have been very deep into the U.S. infrastructure. We're talking about electricity, water. I mean, the essential things we need to run our day-to-day lives. So we know clearly this is a country, not the country itself, but certainly its leadership has animosity towards us. We are rival nations. And, when you see, the tug of war going on between the nations, certainly I don't have a problem with the U.S. at least taking a stand here. You guys can disagree. I wanted to get on my soapbox first, but Justin, Ronica, who wants to jump in?
I'll go first. So couple things here. China will get our data whether TikTok is running or not in the United States. Like you just said, they hacked into some of the most secure systems. Like they already have our data. I think the real problem here is our government. I'm trying not to. I'm a weird conspiracy theorist at times, but the real trouble here is our government taking so much control and shutting things down. Right? TikTok's just the first thing. What's next? Instagram, Twitter. Like they don't always like Musk, right? Is Twitter next because they want to shut that down because too many people are having free speech over there? So I have a problem with our government intervening in this, especially when the guy who, I don't know his name, the guy who runs TikTok is constantly saying this information is not going to the Chinese government. It's not going to the Chinese government. He has constantly said that, under oath in front of our Congress. So the biggest issue is what's the wild goose chase for? And what's next, right? It's that one freedom, that one option, that one thing taken away piece by piece That's the scary part for me. Like, and yeah, it's kids probably shouldn't be on any social media, especially TikTok, but that's here nor there. That's up to the parents, right? Kids in our household aren't on social media, so you have to figure that piece out. But I think the scariest part of all of this is not China getting that information. It's our government taking more control than they probably should.
Yeah, no, valid point. Ronica, you get the last word.
Well, Justin, I appreciate the acknowledgement of being a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. Look, I mean, I think that it's very politically advantageous to be opposed to TikTok, right? So that's why we see that kind of unanimous bipartisan support. It's just like trendy to be against TikTok. But I think if we look deeper into it, I fully support the government's involvement in restrictions on the age of users of these tools, right? And really, to Justin's point, I mean, or to just to the point, the conversation in general, right? Like social media is omnipresent. If we got rid of TikTok or changed the ownership of TikTok, I mean, you still have all of these other tools that young people have access to. And sure, the Chinese Communist Party might be able to tap into other parts of our infrastructure that we need to make more secure. But let's also focus on like the long-term damage that the access to these social media tools is doing to our children. I mean, if you want to talk about competing on the world stage, like our kids are falling behind in basic skills like math and English. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but social media is a huge factor in that. And I am deeply concerned about like our children and their access to it and the age in which they get access to it. And unfortunately, I think it's a really like noble thing to say, like parents can keep them off and parents should do it. But I think the ramifications of what we're looking at are so serious that like some regulation on like age limits, we need that. Like we need to think about ourselves as a nation competitively for generations to come. And so as maybe unconnected as it may seem, I really think like social media use in our kids and how omnipresent it is really hurting us as a country. So it doesn't exactly answer the question, but I do think it speaks to the larger issue that no matter what way you come at solutions to the problem of tools like TikTok and other social media sites, especially with kids, like I would just like to see more bipartisan legislation come into place where it's not just, oh, it's trendy to be like anti-China. Let's actually think about like real, and maybe a ban is the right solution, or I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, but I'm just saying like, let's continue. Let's not just like vote on this. It's trendy. Everybody gets to high five and said they vote on this thing. Let's continue the conversation to protect our kids in a meaningful way. Because as a mom of 3 kids, I feel deeply concerned about it. No matter what I do in my house, they still go to school every day, right? It's still everywhere. So that's sort of my take on it.
Well, Justin, Ronica, thanks so much for joining. Thanks so much for the viewers for tuning in. And well, hopefully we can prompted some good discussions. Especially around entrepreneur burnout, some of the challenges business see, and hopefully you guys tune into the next one. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Brian.